Picture the room. The game is on, the commentators are loud, and every set of eyes is locked to the screen. There is tension in the air, the kind that signals something important is happening, and everyone around you is fully inside it. And you are just there. Not bored exactly, not confused. You understand what's happening. You can follow the rules. You can nod at the right moments. But emotionally, the signal doesn't land. It's like hearing a language you technically recognize, but don't think in. This moment usually arrives with a quiet question. Why does this seem to matter so deeply to everyone else, and not at all to you? Most people answer by assuming something is wrong with them. They either force themselves to perform enthusiasm they don't feel, or quietly carry the belief that they are missing a basic human instinct. But what if this isn't apathy? What if it's simply the moment you recognize clearly, without drama, that this wasn't built for your nervous system? That realization isn't a loss. It's the beginning of understanding how your mind actually works. Before we can understand the people who don't feel the pull, we need to understand why the pull exists at all. Sports don't generate their power from nowhere. They reach into something ancient. For most of human existence, survival depended entirely on belonging to a group. Your tribe determined whether you ate, whether you were protected, whether you lived. Being accepted meant safety. Being excluded meant real danger. Modern sports plug directly into that wiring. At their core, they create a clean, emotionally charged version of us against them. The stakes feel high, even when nothing material is actually at risk, and your nervous system responds as if something real is happening. When your team wins, the brain releases dopamine and testosterone chemicals tied to reward, dominance, and victory. Studies have measured actual hormonal shifts in fans after games, mirroring the same biological patterns our ancestors experienced after a hunt. The brain does not distinguish cleanly between a symbolic victory and a literal one. In 2008, researchers found that men showed higher testosterone levels when their preferred political candidate won the election. The context changes. The mechanism doesn't. Sports work because they offer a safe, socially sanctioned way to activate the tribal brain, the belonging, the emotional release, the shared identity without the physical danger that once came with all three. Here is where the misunderstanding usually deepens. When sports ignite something primal in most people, it's easy to assume that anyone who doesn't feel that ignition is missing a fundamental human instinct. But that isn't what's happening. The tribal switch isn't broken. It simply doesn't flip in the same situations. Everyone has a threshold for what activates belonging. For some, geography is enough: the city you were born in, the team your parents watched. For others, that threshold is higher. Loyalty needs to be earned through shared values or shared effort, not inherited by accident of location. From that perspective, sports fandom can feel strangely arbitrary. The team you're expected to defend is determined by where your family happened to live. Players change constantly. Franchises relocate if the numbers make sense, and yet fans are asked to offer unwavering devotion. For some minds, that arrangement doesn't compute. Their nervous system pauses and asks a question most people never articulate. What exactly am I being asked to attach to here? When the answer doesn't feel real or reciprocal, the signal fades, not from cynicism, from clarity. This isn't indifference, it's discernment. If any part of this is landing for you, take a moment to drop a like on the video. It helps more people find conversations like this. And, if you're drawn to the deeper psychology of human behavior, consider subscribing. It's the best way to stay connected to this work. For many people, this difference in wiring forms long before anyone asks who your team is. Nervous systems are shaped early by what feels safe in the environments we grow up in. In some families, sports are a bonding ritual, weekends organized around games, emotions expressed freely, excitement contained within predictable rhythms. For a child in that environment, sports become associated with safety and connection. But that isn't every childhood. Some people grow up in homes where raised voices didn't signal celebration, they signaled conflict. Crowded rooms weren't energizing. They were something to manage. In those environments, the nervous system learns to stay alert rather than relax into collective excitement. Others grow up in families where connection was built through conversation, creativity, or quiet presence. Identity formed around internal worlds rather than external displays. Over time, the brain adapts. It begins to associate safety with focus and depth of engagement rather than group intensity. The preference for depth over display, for creation over consumption, is often simply the quiet imprint of a mind that learned what it needed to feel stable. There is another layer that rarely gets named, one that has less to do with emotion than with capacity. Your brain has limited cognitive real estate. There is only so much space for deep investment things you track, remember, care about, and return to over time. Being a genuine fan isn't passive. It requires maintaining a mental archive of rosters, histories, statistics, and rivalries across years. For many people, that archive is already full. Some minds allocate their attention early to systems rather than spectacles. How markets move, how music is structured, how a craft deepens with practice. Their attention doesn't scatter. It consolidates. Disinterest in sports isn't a failure to engage. It's a prior commitment. The passion slot is occupied. The stadium isn't empty. It's simply hosting something else. Inside your brain are cells called mirror neurons. They activate not only when you perform an action, but when you watch someone else perform it. This is why you flinch when you see someone fall, why your muscles tighten when an athlete sprints. When a player makes a decisive play, the same reward circuits light up in the spectator's brain as if they were making it themselves. But mirror neurons require identification. You have to see yourself in the person you're watching to feel a bridge. That could be me. That represents me. Without that bridge, the simulation weakens and the emotional payoff never fully arrives. For people who don't feel the pull of sports, this system still works. It simply attaches elsewhere. Their mirror neurons fire while watching a musician execute something difficult. A craftsman shapes raw material into something precise. A thinker articulates an idea that was previously only half-formed. The surge is the same. The target is different. The difference isn't emotional capacity. It's chosen heroes. Some people borrow their sense of motion and meaning from athletes on a field. Others borrow it from creators and builders. The question was never whether the feeling was possible. It was always who you felt connected enough to feel it with. Beneath the polite nodding along, there is often something quieter, a low-level shame that builds over years of small moments. The pause when you admit you didn't watch the game, the look that follows, the way neutrality gets read as judgment, and silence gets mistaken for emptiness. Over time, the brain begins to search for the flaw. Psychologists call this shame for misattribution, taking an external mismatch and internalizing it as personal deficiency. What's actually happening isn't emotional absence. It's that your nervous system isn't designed to light up on command for collective spectacle. The shame comes from comparing your internal truth to an external expectation. Once that distinction becomes clear, the weight begins to lift. You're not failing to participate. You're participating differently. People who don't follow sports aren't standing outside of life. They're participating, just not in the most visible way. Their silence during the game isn't emptiness. It's concentration. A mind turned towards something it's building, or trying to understand something that won't be decided by a final score or reset when the season ends. People who don't choose sports haven't rejected escape or absorption. They've chosen forms of it that leave something behind when the moment ends: work that compounds, skills that deepen, understanding that accumulates. Attention directed inward into an unfolding process rather than outward into a finished narrative. Attention is the most valuable resource you have. Where you point it shapes the kind of person you become. Some people point it toward watching championships unfold. Others point it toward creating something that didn't exist before. That difference doesn't make one path better than the other, but it does explain why the signal never landed, and why, for you, it never needed to. You can subscribe if you do like to continue these deep dives together. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching.